Picture a caveman. You already have the image, don't you? A hunched figure in a single ragged fur, shivering deep inside a dark cave, huddled against the back wall while the wind howls outside. Cold. Primitive. Barely hanging on. Almost everything about that picture is wrong. The truth is that your ancestors didn't just barely survive the brutal cold of the Ice Age, they mastered it. They walked into some of the most hostile winter environments this planet has ever produced, places that would kill an unprepared modern human in hours, and they didn't just endure them. They built lives there, families, communities, for tens of thousands of years, and they did it with no electricity, no central heating, no map, and a world trying very hard to freeze them to death. So how? How did a soft, hairless tropical ape end up thriving in a frozen wasteland? The answer is one of the most underrated survival stories in all of human history. Let's start with the most basic problem: your body. Because here's the thing. You are a tropical animal. Your species evolved in the warm grasslands of Africa, and your body is still built for that climate. You have almost no fur. You lose heat fast. Drop a naked human into an Ice Age winter, and they will be dead before nightfall. By every rule of biology, we had no business surviving up there at all. And yet we did. Not by changing our bodies, but by outsmarting the cold entirely. The first and most important weapon was fire. By the time humans were pushing into freezing climates, they had already been masters of fire for hundreds of thousands of years. But in the Ice Age, fire stopped being a convenience and became the single thread between life and death. It wasn't just for warmth. It cooked food, which unlocked more calories from every bite. It dried wet clothing that could otherwise kill you. It pushed back predators in the dark, and it extended the short winter daylight into long, survivable nights. And keeping a fire alive in sub-zero cold is genuinely hard, so they got serious about it. The evidence suggests Ice Age humans carefully tended their fires, carried glowing embers with them when they traveled so they wouldn't have to start over, and stored dry fuel inside their shelters. Fire-starting tools like flint and pyrite became treasured possessions. A living flame was a possession worth protecting at all costs because everyone gathered around it depended on it to live. But fire alone wasn't enough. You can't carry a bonfire on your back when you're out hunting in the snow. For that, they needed to solve the problem of the human body itself. And this is where they made what one historian calls the most important invention in human history. It wasn't the wheel. It wasn't farming. It was the sewing needle. Around 40,000 years ago, humans began carving fine needles out of bone. And that tiny tool changed everything. Before the needle, people draped themselves in loose, crude hides. Better than nothing, but full of gaps the wind could tear straight through. The needle let them do something revolutionary. It let them tailor. They could now stitch multiple animal skins into fitted, layered clothing, sealed at the seams, shaped to the body. And the sophistication of what they made is genuinely staggering. Ice Age clothing wasn't a single fur thrown over the shoulders. It was a layered system, much like modern mountaineering gear. They would carefully select different skins for different jobs: reindeer, Arctic fox, hare, even bird skins with the feathers left on for insulation, and sew them into 3 or 4 layers. A moisture-wicking inner layer, insulating middle layers, a wind and water-resistant outer shell. They had thread made from plant fibers. There's even evidence some of it was dyed in colors. These were not desperate savages in rags. They were skilled tailors making technical winter clothing 40,000 years ago. Think about that the next time you zip up a winter coat. You are using the exact same idea: layered, fitted, sealed insulation that your ancestors invented by hand, by firelight with bone needles, while the Ice Age raged outside. Now they could keep their fire and carry their warmth. The last piece was a place to live. And this is where we bust the caveman myth for good. Victorian archaeologists found ancient remains in caves and assumed that's where everyone lived, hence the word caveman. But the evidence tells a different story. People used caves and rock overhangs as shelter when they happened to be available, sure, because they're naturally insulated and block the wind. But across the vast open plains where there were no caves for hundreds of miles, humans did something far more impressive. They built their own. In Eastern Europe, archaeologists have found the remains of dwellings made from mammoth bones. Some of these structures are over 20,000 years old. Imagine the scale of it. A circular framework built from the massive bones and tusks of mammoths, then covered over with hides and packed earth for insulation, with a hearth burning in the center. These weren't crude lean-tos. They were engineered, warm, permanent homes, built on a frozen landscape, heated from within. A pocket of summer, deliberately constructed in the dead of an ice age. So they had heat, clothing, and shelter. But there was still one enemy left: hunger. Because in a frozen winter, there is almost nothing to forage. No fruit, no plants, nothing growing. So they planned ahead. Ice Age humans were expert food storekeepers. After a successful hunt, they didn't just feast and move on, they preserved. They dried meat and fish to last through the lean months. And in a brilliant move, they used the cold itself as a tool, freezing meat after a large kill to keep it edible for the winter, turning the very thing trying to kill them into the world's first refrigerator. There's even evidence of them weighting down carcasses underwater in cold ponds to preserve them, and of storing bones for weeks to crack open later for the rich marrow inside. Animal fat became precious, a dense source of the enormous calories a body burns just staying warm. A single good hunt, carefully stored, could be the difference between a group seeing spring and not. But I've saved the most important survival tool for last. Because it wasn't a tool at all, it was each other. No single person, no matter how clever, survives an Ice Age winter alone. The fire has to be watched through the night. The clothing has to be sewn, a job that takes enormous time and skill. The hunts that brought down massive animals required many people working as one, driving herds into traps. And when one group ran short, the evidence shows they traded with others, moving stone, tools, and food across distances of hundreds of miles. Survival wasn't about one tough individual against the wild. It was about the group. Cooperation was the real superpower. The thing that let a fragile tropical ape outlast the cold was that it never faced the cold alone. So go back to that first image. The lone caveman shivering in a dark cave. And replace it with the truth. A warm, fire-lit dwelling built from mammoth bone. People in expertly tailored layered clothing, dried food stored for the winter, a community working together, surrounded by a frozen world they had learned not to fear, but to outwit. They weren't barely surviving. They were winning. And every single one of us is here, right now, warm in a heated room, because tens of thousands of years ago, our ancestors were clever enough and worked together well enough to beat back the cold with nothing but fire, bone, hide, and each other. You didn't inherit your comfort. You inherited their genius.